parents, first thing you should do is go to your school and find out what the learning objectives are for that year, what's going to be learned, what's going to be read, and what do you hope to accomplish. And if they tell you and they're open about it, that's a good sign. If they say, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. You just go home and have a nice, you watch Netflix, your kid will be fine. Then that's a danger sign.
Hey, Joyful Warriors, this is Tiffany Justice with Moms for Liberty, and I am very excited to have Mr. Bill Bennett joining us. I could read a bio, but I don't think that would be anywhere as interesting as hearing from Bill himself about his life and work. So, Bill, welcome to the Joyful Warrior podcast. I would love if you could take a few minutes and just tell us a little bit about you and your life and your work in education. Sure.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be with you, Joyful Warrior, Tiffany, and the rest of the Joyful Warriors. So much admire your work, and we'll get into that. I was appointed by Ronald Reagan to be chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I am a humanities, scholar, you'd say, myself, with a PhD in philosophy, and I've written several history books and philosophy books. I enjoy reading the great works of literature and philosophy, and would like more of our students to be reading them. The things that elevate. And the things that bring down. It's better to elevate. I was then the Secretary of Education for Ronald Reagan, and we had a lot of fun. I went around the country. It was my wife's idea. You know about moms and wives, Tiffany, huh? She said, why don't you go visit the schools before you give your pronouncements? And I said, you mean find out what I'm talking about? She said, yeah. I said, well, why should I be different from the other guys? And she said, because you're the Secretary of Education, do your homework. Went to 120 schools then. To date, I've been in about 600 schools. I've been in the good, I've been in the bad, and I've been in the ugly. And I have watched our educational system, and I have seen at its high points, some of that in the 60s, the early 60s, and I've seen it at low points, and I think it's a low point now. I ended up spending almost my entire professional career working in education after visiting the schools, writing about it, doing a number of reports. I firmly believe with H.G. Wells that life is a race between education and catastrophe, and we have to educate our children well. We have to educate them to the right things, and we have to take part in their education. I told you at the beginning of this, I want to ask you some questions because it's so important what you guys are doing, the Joyful Warriors. Not every teacher is a parent, but every parent is a teacher.
Right.
And that parent is the child's most important teacher. And if I said it once, I said it 1,000 times. Right now, I don't want to talk about myself anymore. But right now, we're looking at another crisis. I don't know if you've seen the NAEP reports, the NAEP numbers, they're just out. Reading and math, way, way down. We have suffered incredible losses, and not just because of COVID.
No,
COVID was a window, and people a lot of your group saw into that classroom and saw those teachers and saw what was going on and said, wait a minute, this isn't right. We need to fix this. And parents all over the country saw that. But the decline had started before COVID. We have stopped doing what works. When I was Secretary of Education, we did a series of books called What Works. It was based on hard knowledge of what works, hard data. We talked about reading. We talked about, here's an old-fashioned term, memorization and recitation as things that are good for the schools. And we talked about the need to encourage schools to uplift students, not to degrade them, but to uplift them. And I think we have some problems in that category right now.
Yeah, we're seeing declining scores. And you're right, it's not because of COVID, not solely because of COVID, although COVID certainly exacerbated, I think, what was happening. But Bill, before COVID, 2019, 2020, we saw the kids are not doing well in school. I remember hearing someone speak on the House floor in Florida. It was a Democrat, and they were sharing. They said that there are tribes in Africa, and the way they greet each other is, how are the children? And the answer back that they want to hear is the children are well. And that was how they judged the health of their tribe. And so I really, I ask to you, Bill, how are the children? And I'd love to hear from you, because from our perspective as moms, the kids are not okay.
They're not okay. The children are in bad shape. First start with the schools and academic learning. It's way down. And to me, if I said it once, I said 1,000 times when I was secretary. Reading is the most important thing, to learn how to read and to read well. And if you're not reading well by the 3rd or 4th grade, you're in trouble, and your odds of going to jail are dramatically higher. And we know how to teach reading, but we've been off on this adventure doing stuff that's not based on science of reading, that isn't clear, that doesn't support what the good teachers want to do, that does not correct the student in time. And so we've got a lot of people who don't read. That NAEP report points out the reading for pleasure is way down. And I think it's down also in terms of what's required in the schools. And I also think the moral level, if you will, of what's being asked of children to read is down. I did a book called The Book of Virtues, which maybe many of your members are familiar with. And, we said there that the purpose of education is to enlarge the mind and save the soul. And, if we believe these are spiritual beings, these young people who are putting our trust, we will take care of those things. And we're not doing it.
Well, and to your point, it is a betrayal of trust. That is the most succinct way that I can put into words the idea that parents send their children to school and there's literally a theft of education happening. The kids' education is being stolen from them. We're taking the hours, but we're not giving them practicable skills that they can use. We're not unfolding their full potential. And so a couple questions, Bill. I want to talk about how, the importance of moral values and character development and how we can integrate those principles into modern education, right? I want to get there with you at one point, but I have to ask you, how have issues like literacy or like education become so politicized? Because our moms are all over the country stepping up and saying, they saw their kids couldn't read at their kitchen table. They were concerned, right? We have not had lower literacy rates in years, but yet we have the highest graduation rates we've ever seen, right? Graduation inflation. So how does this issue get so politicized to the point where now people are being told that you're not allowed to have an opinion about this?
The left made it happen, frankly. The left decided to take over the schools. They understood something very important. If you want to control a people in a country, you will look to the schools. There's a very interesting book I read by a French author who talks about the takeover of France by radical Islamists. And as they come and have many children and take over positions, lower levels of government, they then have the opportunity to take higher positions of government. But they don't take the Defense Department. They don't take the Environmental Department. They take the departments of education, because that's where you nurture or not the next generation. The left has done this through the radicalization of the teachers' unions, and I've been watching them for a long time and dealing with them for a very long time. And they have decided they're in charge of the schools, and what they say is got to be followed. And parents object to that, and parents should object to that. And you saw, this reduced to the absurdity of the Democrat candidate for governor of Virginia saying, well, why should a parent, be telling, teachers what to teach in the classroom? I did a book called The Educated Child with Checker Finn and John Cribb. And we said, parents, first thing you should do is go to your school and find out what the learning objectives are for that year, what's going to be learned, what's going to be read, and what do you hope to accomplish? And if they tell you and they're open about it, that's a good sign. If they say, don't worry about it, We'll take care of it. You just go home and have a nice, you watch Netflix. Well, your kid will be fine. Then that's a danger sign. And there's more and more of that.
Does it surprise you? I apologize. Does it surprise you the lack of transparency now? The fact that parents are asking for the curriculum, or they're saying, well, the curriculum is highly prescriptive. We'd like to see the teacher's manual, and right. They're being hit with crazy public records request fees. And there are times there's a lot of talk, oh, well, this is copyrighted information, we can't show it to you. Like, what do you say to that right now? I can't even imagine what you think.
Well, it's crazy. It's crazy. Whose children are these? Yeah. That's really the fundamental question. And if they will not answer in the schools what's going to be taught, how it's going to be taught, what's going to be read, then go somewhere else, or elect new school board members. And that's a question I wanted to ask you. In light of the damage that's been done, where do you put your energies? The school boards, the school choice movement, curriculum, all of the above. What's the thrust here for you guys?
All of the above, but it's reclaiming and reforming public education. I think the first step that we really have to take is an honest acknowledgement about the fact that our K through 12 classrooms are captured. And we need to reclaim them. And, in America, we have local control. It's a beautiful thing. I served as a school board member, and school board members are oftentimes making some of the most important decisions affecting you as a family and your life.
Absolutely.
So getting liberty-minded individuals elected onto school boards is job number one, because you really can turn the tide of a district with different school board members. You can pull that strategic plan. You can rewrite the mission statement. You can change the trajectory of the focus. You can change the way that you're spending the money so that you can, your budget is how you prioritize. And so if reading is a priority and proper teacher preparation is a priority, then you're going to direct money to those things. And right now we have such a situation in America's public schools where we have these public-private partnerships and all of these different community partnerships. And I really feel, Bill, that our schools are being used to launder money out of. Taxpayers are paying for their own demise almost, because oftentimes there are all kinds of grants and things that different groups are being given to come into schools and do work. And they're oftentimes very radical leftist organizations that are doing that work. And we're being told that it's for the safety of the children, for their psychological safety. But the truth of the matter is that I think the boundary between school and home has become very blurred. So reclaiming and then reforming. The biggest concern that I have right now, and I continue to say, I came on your podcast very early on with Moms for Liberty, is the fact that I do think there are conservative educators, and I do think there are conservative leaders within the education world. I don't think the majority of teachers are bought into this radical idea of what education has become, but we need to help them to grow and to take those positions of leadership. And so, for me, I want to build the bench. We need a pipeline. We need to be identifying and building and training up new leaders, because these school board members come in and, they make policy, they set the course of the district, but you need someone who is an educational leader to be able to set the procedure and make the policy come alive.
That's great. That's great. For 30 years, Tiffany, when I would give a speech about education and the problems, and people would raise their hands and say, what do I do? I'm very concerned. I would say, run for the school board. And they'd laugh. They'd say, the school board? All right, come on. I'd say, look, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the decisions are made. And I said, it's very tough work, too. But if you care, you will do it. I used to say, as a kind of a joke, I said, however, if you do serve on a school board and you're a Catholic, you will not have any time in purgatory. You will go right to heaven, because it is purgatory to sit through some of those meetings.
It's hard work. And, I was a
very
disruptor.
Hard work.
Yeah, I was a disruptor.
Yeah.
So I asked a lot of questions, and I wasn't beholden to the union. I wasn't beholden to the system. I think school systems do two things very well. Celebrate themselves and protect themselves. And from what I see, they like to celebrate themselves. There's that graduation rate thing again, right? Celebrate themselves in order to protect themselves. They also have so much money for legal help. The only regret that I really have from my time on school board was the fact that when situations would arise with a student and a parent, when I could see that there was I think some of the issues were more systemic than I probably, I didn't push hard enough in that moment, because I was very, you're dealing with a child who may be in distress, you're dealing with parents who are concerned, and you very much want to help that child. But the truth is, if you've got one kid in a district of 40,000 kids dealing with that issue, they are not the only one. And so,
of course,
I think that there were lots of little fires bubbling up, and it was kind of like lava, right? And there was that little fire, there was that big fire underneath that you just couldn't see. And then I think COVID happened, and everybody got to see, didn't we? So let's talk about the unions. I call them the K-12 cartel. Oh, yes, sir.
I just want to interrupt because what you said is very encouraging. But there are a lot of good teachers out there, and they need encouragement, they need support, and they need to know that they can speak up and not be silenced by the louder and more abrasive people. I agree with you, and I think there are some new school leaders in the country, some of whom we'll be talking about in a minute, who could make a very important difference. This is how democracy is supposed to work. Go ahead.
I just wanted a quick, chat about the unions. I have been shocked. I don't think parents realize how many different parts of the bargaining contract with the unions actually dictate what their child's school experience is like. The other thing that I'm concerned about is the fact that, the teachers' unions should be honest about the fact that they are there to support the teachers. And that's okay. I understand that's their role, but they like to make you think that they're doing what's best for kids. And I don't believe that's true. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, to determine whether they're doing what's best for kids, we come back to, a very pragmatic approach. What works? What is effective? What gets young people to a level of literacy, moral literacy, numeracy, the things we want them to achieve, and we can measure that. Thank goodness for the NAEP.
Right.
It's one of the few honest assessments left. And by the way, I don't know if you know, there's an assault on NAEP.
Oh, I do, because they don't like the fact.
Down.
Yeah, they don't like the fact that American parents have a barometer to be able to see how are my kids doing, and they're not. As I said,
that's right.
The kids are not okay.
That's right. But I think a lot of these members can be encouraged to do the right thing. And, having spent a lot of time visiting schools, now over 600, I like a lot of the teachers I meet. Yeah. I just wish the good ones, Yeats says, the best lack all conviction and the worst are full of passionate intensity, So we need more passionate intensity from the best. But, your organization is a signal that a very encouraging signal. That the parents are involved. Your voice is so important, and it's getting loud. How many members now?
Over 130,000 now.
That's amazing. You got Democrats in there too, don't you?
Yes, sir. And Robert Kennedy is actually speaking at the summit that's coming up. So we're interested to hear from him about education and, his thoughts.
Well, encourage him, will you? I'd love to see him. Okay. Anyway, good. So
I think there are a lot of teachers that are wondering now, there's a lot of divisiveness happening across the country, and some of the issues seem to be very polarizing. And so the question that I would ask you would be, do you have any strategies, or what do you recommend for fostering, good civil discourse, respectful dialogue, especially within schools, right? And we're talking about K through 12. So, there's no academic freedom in K through 12 schools. Teachers don't have the right to free speech. They can't just, there are standards, and there's, as you said, there are things to be taught, right? There's a roadmap. So some advice about kind of handling some of those things from you, I'd love to hear.
Well, I go back to, trained as a philosopher, I go back to Socrates and the conditions of good dialogue. He said for important and good dialogue to take place, three things are required. Candor, which is tell the truth, say what you think. Intelligence, and we, hope for some measure of intelligence in these discussions. And goodwill. And goodwill means you start with the assumption that we should be able to agree on things. Right. Even if at the end of the day, people are not going to agree with you solely because, you stand for different things. But you always begin a dialogue with the notion that we can come to a conclusion together. That's what civil dialogue really means. And we should always try that. Sometimes it doesn't work. mean, I've watched some of these board meetings where people get gavelled down, not allowed to speak. But, the publicity for that and that you all have been able to engender is very important, because sunlight is, as Brandeis said, is the best disinfectant.
So, Bill, we've got parents becoming more involved in education. You mentioned Terry McAuliffe. He said, parents shouldn't be deciding anything. Teachers should be deciding stuff. So we're at this point where we're having a national conversation about how involved should parents be in their children's education. And specifically when it comes to shaping policy, education policy, and decision-making processes that are happening in schools. So what do you think? Where's the balance between home and school, and how do we find the boundaries again?
I don't think there's a boundary really between home and school. If you care about your child. I mean, I watched my wife do the carpool, for both boys for I don't know how many years, and then come home and the homework, the science projects, be involved. And a lot of that is at home, but also at school. When things came up that we weren't sure about, wondered about, we went to school. I was Secretary of Education, and I did the math homework with both my boys over the phone, no matter where I was. I'd call them up, and I would have had a dinner. And before I went to sleep, we do the math. We do the math homework, and they know that. They know if you care, and if, as my wife likes to say in her program, if we give our children the best, they will give us their best. At least the odds are much better. But you are the critical teacher as the parent. But because you're the critical teacher at home doesn't mean you can neglect what's going on at school, because you will find some people, not most, but you will find some people who say those things your parents are telling you, yeah, just a bunch of bunk, just a bunch of, la la. And we'll tell you about the real world, and we'll tell you what the founders were really like. Well, you want to take down a statue, we'll go with you. And there's so much of this garbage out there. It's infuriating. The fight for our children and the fight that your organization is making is the critical fight of our time, I believe.
Well, I agree. And I think over 130,000 parents and community members around the country agree. And I think we're just getting started. So, Bill, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you'll come back to the Joyful Warrior podcast to chat again, because, we love you here. And you are, you've been such an amazing leader, and we are trying to carry on some of your great work. So thank you again for joining us. You are very kind, and you are a great leader. And love to all the Joyful Warriors. And may you grow and be ever larger. Good. Thank you. Thank you.